So Statistics South Africa is today expected to release the latest consumer price index figures. Now, these figures will reveal how South Africa is doing in terms of the cost of living, especially when it comes to food items. Let's speak to one of the experts about what these numbers really mean for the unemployed and the working class. Dr. Dick Forslund is a senior economist at Alternative Information and Development Center. The good doctor joins us via our video link this morning. It's lovely to have you on the program, sir. Thank you very much indeed for making time so early on a Wednesday morning. I want to just begin by first exploring the process typically that we follow when calculating these CPI numbers. Economics in varsity tells me that you essentially choose a group of items and you evaluate how much those items cost in this cycle versus the cycle before, and that's how you essentially gauge whether or not things are getting more expensive. But the unique condition around this time is that there were very important geopolitical developments that adversely affected some of these products. What does that say about the kind of CPI figures we're likely to see today?
Yeah, good morning, Ayanda. Yeah, you can see in the previous CPI report, this report comes every month. You can see, for example, that the price of the oil and cooking oil increased by 21% year on year. And that has really to do with the war in Ukraine, because Ukraine is one of the main exporters of sunflower oil. So then you can see it reflected in the inflation reports. And another thing which is common cause is the issue of petrol and the price of transport. You can also see how this is affecting the so-called consumer price index. But I mean, this is only a part of what the households are consuming, even if these are very important items. And when it comes to petrol, of course, as you know, this spread out in the whole in the prices of many different products, because a lot of all the food in South Africa is transported, and transported on roads mostly because of the crisis in the transport system with rail and so on. So yeah, it's really affected, and I expect now that the inflation, that the price increases on goods and services will be over 6% on the average in this report.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's important to know also that this average or this typical household, the way you are doing this, you have to it's not really an error, but it completely twists also the inflation reports when it comes to how price increases are hitting ordinary people. And because of inequality in South Africa, the consumption among the top 10% of households, what they are consuming, this affects they are weighed in by close to 50% in the inflation reports. So that is why, for example, the household index that is produced by an institute in Pietermaritzburg has become so important also as a kind of what can you say, alternative to Stats SA's inflation report. So I'm waiting for that report too, because they are speaking about how inflation price increases are hitting specifically ordinary working class household.
That's so interesting. So are you saying we should get into a space where we start talking about CPI and its impact on the particular class that you are part of, for lack of a better term?
Yeah, and this is, if you read the inflation report carefully, Stats SA, they also try to do such a reporting. So they are dividing the households from the poorest, those who have the lowest consumption, to those who have the highest consumption in 10 parts. And there you can see for the latest report last month, you can see that the inflation according to Stats SA, for the poorest households, the poorest 10%, even poorest 10 and 30% households, it was not 5.9% as was reported in so-called headline inflation. It was up to 6.4%. But I mean, another interesting thing also, which the viewers, and I don't know about you, but with journalists, if you really read the report, you will see that domestic worker wages are in the headline CPI report. And they are influencing the so-called headline inflation with 2.5%. So you can even follow the wages of the wage development on domestic workers in the CPI reports. And they are weighted in by 2.5% in the index. And you can see that year on year, last month, their wage increase was 2.9%. So it was sort of half of the inflation rate. And the year before, and I looked at it yesterday, their wage increases for domestic workers was 2.1%. So this is really something for domestic workers' unions to study, because there they can follow what Statistics SA thinks about, what they say about the wages for domestic workers. And of course, domestic workers is only used by the top 10% of the households.
Sure. So, I guess it's a double blow for those who work as domestic workers, isn't it? I mean, on the one hand, we're seeing that inflation for the class typically that they'll be part of is higher than headline inflation. And on the other hand, the wage increases are not keeping up. In other words, there's this growing gap between how much they earn and how much more expensive it is for them to live in this country.
Yeah, exactly. That's the case. And you can also see, you can speculate what has happened during the last 2 years, because the previous year, that this is when the lockdown was and COVID broke out and so on. So it seems like the top 10% households, they reacted to this crisis also, because of course they also experience inflation, even if it's not at all so important for them. But they reacted by not increasing the domestic worker wages at the rate of inflation even. So that's kind of like a preliminary conclusion I draw from this.
Sure. Of course, around this time, whenever we talk about inflation, there's that ancient old debate that comes up about how the Reserve Bank should be responding to this for the benefit, essentially, of the consumer. We know that there's going to be another MPC announcement in a few days' time. Where do you stand on that debate? Because I know it's, especially among, senior economists, there's always different ideological standpoints about the role of the Reserve Bank and what it should do to try and alleviate the kind of conditions we're facing in not only South Africa, but certainly around the world.
Yeah, no, I certainly hope that they will not increase the interest rates again. But I mean, my hopes in that regard are sitting in the treetops, because we know also the opinion of the governor of the Reserve Bank.
Yeah.
So everybody is expecting him to increase the interest rate. But you can, if you think about it, you will understand that this is also a part of the inflation, of course, for the vast majority of all the households who have loans of any kinds, or shopping cards, or credit card, or a bond on their card, or on their car. They will experience that as a part of inflation, of course, and I think it's also conceptually, or I think it's basically wrong, because this inflation that we experience now is not a result of sort of more and more spending of the households, or that households are taking on more and more loans, and that the economy is overheated. As everybody knows, it's completely the opposite. When you have unemployment rates sort of reaching 50% in the economy, and I think we should use the so-called expanded definition of unemployment here, and not the usual official unemployment numbers. So the Reserve Bank is trying to sort of protect the value of the rand, but there would be alternatives to do that. You could have speed bumps when it comes to so-called speed bumps when it comes to the trading of money or across the border, or you can do different kind of regulation of sort of the rand value and so on. So, but I mean, ordinary shop or ordinary business which has a lot of loans, when these price increases on these loans comes to them in the form of interest rate, they might also react, of course, by increasing the prices of what they are, of the services or the goods that they are selling. So then, in that way, you will have kind of like a small inflation push also from what the Reserve Bank is doing.
Sure.
So I don't like that they will. I mean, the South Africa already is one of the countries with the highest interest rate in the world, and they shouldn't do it, but they will do it.
Sure. It is a complex issue. Thanks very much indeed for giving us your take. Really do appreciate your insights this morning. Dr. Dick Forslund is a senior economist at Alternative Information and Development Center. That, of course, is the AIDC. Once again, Doc, thanks very much indeed for your time.